For those of you who have followed our work over the years, you may know that we've been a leader in interpreting this rising Latino population to the political class, and sometimes it actually takes hold and works in our advocacy. But there was no one more instrumental or more important in convincing us to take this on, believe it or not, Secretary, 10 years ago in 2002 than Ken Salazar when he was Attorney General out in Colorado. He was a dogged advocate for a new kind of politics back then, and really was our great inspiration, which has led us over now a decade to have spent an awful lot of money and devote an enormous amount of energy to becoming a leader in helping America understand how it's changing. And you know, one of the stories that I like to tell, because my wife is from New Mexico, and that, you know, when he was a senator, it's possible, and we've never really talked about this, but it's possible that other than the Native American senators, that the Salazar family has been here in the United States longer than any other family to serve in the United States Senate. Now, how's that possible, right? It's because his family were among the founders of Santa Fe in the late 16th and early 17th century. And what people don't really know, because my wife is from New Mexico, is that the oldest part of the country, right, is actually there. And the building that we had our wedding reception in was the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, which was built in 1610 and is the oldest continuously occupied government building in the United States. So one of my great stories that I always tell about my good friend Ken Salazar is that perhaps in all of American history, his family came to this land earlier than any other person to serve in the United States Senate. He doesn't have to confirm or deny that. I get to say that. But it's really an incredible pleasure to host him here today. I'm so proud of the work that he's done in the Senate. I think it was, as much as I was excited that President Obama chose him to be the Secretary of the Interior, I think in a time when it's been hard to get things done, when it's been difficult for the two parties to find common ground, I think we lost a critical link in the Senate when he left that would have helped us, I think, get more things done and find common ground between the two parties. I mean, but you know, the loss of the Senate was President Obama's great gain. And we've seen what we're going to be discussing today is, I think, a part of the story of the Interior Department that has been very important for this administration that is perhaps not as well understood in the broader discussion here in Washington. Secretary Salazar has been a leader in really trying to craft this new energy future for America that is so essential to our future prosperity in the 21st century, and to really reimagine what this remarkable and historic part of our government, the Interior Department. It was wonderful seeing him recently. I mean, you walk into those halls, right, and the history of that building is just with you at every step. To really reinvent the Interior Department to be a 21st century tool for achieving many of the original goals that it was set out to do when it was created a long time ago. So we're very lucky and fortunate to have the Secretary with us today. We're going to hear some remarks and take a few questions. We'll have time for Q&A. And I just want to remind everybody that this is the latest in a series of events that we've been doing, that Claire Geeson, who's here with us today, have been hosting around this concept of a clean energy solution series. We know that legislation may have stalled in Washington, but there is amazing work being done throughout our government and throughout the private sector and public-private partnerships all around America that are reimagining what our energy future could be and are actually bringing it about. We are optimists that we're going to get there. We hope we're going to have to drag Congress, I think, kicking and screaming with us here to get it done. But I'm proud of the work that she's done and the relentless approach that we've taken to make sure that Washington is aware that despite the lack of progress here, progress is being made. So this is the latest in a series of events around that theme. And will you please join me in welcoming the Secretary of the Interior, our good friend Ken Salazar.
Thank you, Simon, for that kind introduction. And it is true. When I came to Washington right after Ben Nighthorse Gamble decided that he was not going to run again for office, I was getting lost a lot because the city is very hard to navigate, and Simon was one of those people who said, hey, we can try to help you make some connections here and help you understand not only policy but also this city. And back then and even before then, as Attorney General, I very much have enjoyed working with Simon and have enjoyed very much the work that NDN has been doing. And I will just make a footnote with respect to NDN. I do think that they were probably the first of the organizations that came together to say, when you look at the United States of America, the fact that we are a country which is still on a march towards a more perfect union, being about an inclusive America, means about being inclusive in everything that we're doing, including in the political system. And that means as you today look at 54 million Latinos in the United States of America, that it's important that their aspirations, their history, and their interests be very much a part of the national dialogue in a proactive and positive way. And so NDN has led that, and we very much appreciate all the work that they've done. Simon asked me if I would come and just share some comments with you on energy, and I will do that. In my own view is when you look back at the 3 years under President Obama, we have made major strides to getting to a point where energy security is within our grasp. And yet, when you listen to some of the members in the House of Representatives, they are still living in what I consider to be an imaginary and fairy tale kind of land, where they think that we can simply take one of Harry Potter's wands and somehow bring gasoline prices down to $2 or $2.50. But it's good that there are other people who understand the real world of energy, and many of you are here in this room. And when you look at the real world of energy, I think that we, in the last 3 years, have made some very significant progress as we have moved our country towards a new energy economy, where we have developed and have been implementing in all of the above energy strategy under President Obama's leadership. And I will say that at the outset, when I sat down with the then President-elect in Chicago, we had a conversation about those issues that I would work on. And for me, the 3 issues are simple. They're about energy, they're about conservation, and about Native Americans. And the President and I agreed that I would work on those 3 issues as highlights of the time as Secretary of Interior. And I'm proud to say that on all those fronts, I think we have made some historic progress. On the energy front, as you know, I have been a part of the team that has led the President's efforts on energy. I think the results speak for themselves, and they tell the story of great success that we have had in this country, success which frankly eluded this country for a very long time. As the President has recently said time and again, and as I have said as I've traveled around the country, we know that when you talk about gas prices and oil price shocks, that there's no silver bullet, that we can't simply bring gas prices down. And so our approach really from the time before this most recent oil and gas price hike has been to make sure that we are pursuing a long-term strategy that will achieve the national imperatives for this country in terms of energy security, economic security, and environmental security. And to that end, I will just give you the following facts. You look at all of the above energy strategy, it's important to note that oil and gas are very much a part of that strategy. We know we're not going to get off of oil and gas, and we know that they are going to be a very significant part of our future. So what's happened? Today, in terms of oil production, we are at an 8-year high in the United States of America. In terms of domestic gas production and the future of natural gas, we are at an all-time high in the history of the country relative to natural gas, and have a very robust future as we look to how natural gas will help power our economy. In terms of oil imports, for many of you who heard our Senate debates on the 2005 energy bill and the 2007 energy bill, you know, as you're working with Steve Black, my counselor, that for me, energy security was very important for a lot of reasons, but one of them was just our huge over-dependence, over-reliance on oil that we were importing from other countries. And we have made significant progress. We are now at the lowest imports in 16 years. When you look at where we were in 2009, we were importing over 55, close to 57% of our oil from foreign countries. Today, it's about 45%, so we're moving in the right direction in terms of getting rid of the dependence, over-dependence that we've had on foreign oil. Last year alone, through a mix of our energy programs that are being implemented and the high fuel efficiency standards that are now in place, we ended up importing 1 million barrels a day less, 1 million barrels a day less last year than the year before. That's a lot of oil in terms of the lessening of the amount of oil that we're importing from foreign countries. So just a couple of other statistics that will show you the facts on oil and gas. We have the highest U.S. rig count of all time, both onshore and offshore when you combine them, which is incredibly, I think, a great achievement. In terms of the Outer Continental Shelf and permits that have been issued in the Outer Continental Shelf and in the Gulf of Mexico, many of you watched the nation as we went through what was a horrific crisis in April, began on April 20th of 2010. And for 87 days during that time frame, 50,000 barrels a day on average were escaping out into the Gulf of Mexico. And our efforts to try to put the whole offshore program together have been largely successful. I think many people at the time when oil was gushing out into the Gulf probably felt that we should simply stop producing any more oil and gas from the oceans of America. Our decision was no. What we had to do was we had to reform and overhaul all of those agencies that had been overseeing the oil production from the Outer Continental Shelf. And we have done that. We've taken the former Minerals Management Service and we have split it up into an agency that now is an agency of cops that inspects and enforces the law under the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. We've created a planning agency through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management that plans for the Outer Continental Shelf, and not only for oil and gas, but as many of you who are here, standing up renewable energy on the Atlantic in Oregon and in other places. And so our work in terms of reform on how we manage the energy that comes from our oceans has also been something that has been very significant. Now, if you hear the critics, or you hear some of my good Republican friends in the House of Representatives attack us, they say, well, that's all happening out there in the Bakken on private lands, and none of that is happening on federal lands. Fact of the matter is it's not true, notwithstanding the fact that we weathered the Deepwater Horizon storm. We know that oil production on federal lands is up 13% in the last 3 years. That's 13% over the last 3 years of the Bush administration. So we continue to make sure that we are moving forward with oil production on federal lands. A similar statistic with gas, where we have seen significant increases in terms of gas production. And it's also important for us to occasionally remind the oil and gas companies who, with some of their Republican colleagues in the House of Representatives, seem to want to have a lot more acreage made available to them. Well, we are already making a huge amount of acreage available to oil and gas exploration, some 50 million acres, both onshore and offshore. Simon, today are leases that have been issued and which are just sitting there idle and not being developed by the company. So we have made huge strides in what we are doing with respect to making sure that we're making lands available for development. Now, as I speak about oil and gas, it's also important for us to recognize that we also, in this administration, as part of the all of the above strategy, have moved forward with the world of renewable energy in a way that no one, I think, ever imagined we could actually do. In our time, since I became Secretary of Interior in 2009, we have permitted 29 solar and geothermal and wind projects in this country on public lands alone. And we're in a position where by the end of this year, we will have permitted 10,000 megawatts of solar and wind and geothermal power. In the next several weeks, we will actually be moving forward with turning on one of those first large commercial solar scale plants that will start putting energy on the grid in the southwestern part of the United States. And for those of you who have followed the work that we've done along the Atlantic coast, we now have a system for the permitting of renewable energy off the Atlantic coast where we believe the potential is huge in terms of powering all of, or a significant part of our energy needs all along the Atlantic coast. And having the kind of partnership that we have been able to develop with each of those states has allowed us to come in and essentially deconflict those areas so we know where the best places are for the development of wind resources off of the Atlantic. At the end of the day, if you look at the President's all of the above energy strategy, which we have been a part of implementing, I'm very proud to say that in a 3-year time period, which is not a lot of time, but in that 3-year time frame, we have been able to double the amount of renewable energy that is being produced in the United States of America. And so I'm proud of the work, yes, that we've done on oil and gas, but I'm equally proud of the work that we've done on renewable energy for our country. And it doesn't end just with the renewable energy that my department is involved in. We also have watched what's happened with the Department of Energy and Department of Agriculture as biorefineries are now opening up as we look at the prospects of advanced biofuels for biorefineries now in the United States of America. And so we're well on our way in terms of moving forward with the development of alternative fuels. We also have not turned we have also, let me put it this way, we also have opened up, in my view, a new chapter of looking at nuclear energy. For 30 years, it had been a door that had been shut. The first nuclear facility has actually been permitted under this in the last 3 years. So, and finally, let me just say that I think as we look at energy, you can't look at energy without looking at the whole question of efficiency, and that's true whether it's with respect to buildings or whether it's with respect to vehicles. This President, under the executive authority of the administration, has pushed to make sure that we have the kinds of vehicles that will get us to a point where we're driving vehicles that on average will make 55 miles to a gallon. When we get to that point, we will be saving the kind of oil in the United States of America, and we will be able to power our vehicles through other forms of energy, including electricity, through the new vehicles, advanced vehicles that are being built. So fuel efficiency is certainly a big part of what our administration has stood for. Now, in these times, you think about whether or not this Congress, and especially in the House of Representatives, whether we can get away from the bumper sticker politics of the moment and whether we can actually get some things done. I have suggested to the members of the House of Representatives and to the Senate as well that I think there are some things that we ought to be able to get done, matters that I don't believe ought to be controversial at all. And let me just speak about 3 of those issues very quickly. First, we ought to be able to move forward and codify the reforms that we have made in the aftermath of the Deepwater Horizon. To me, it is very disconcerting to take a look at what this House of Representatives has done and this Congress, and they have not moved forward at all with any of the reforms that have been instituted since the Deepwater Horizon. Now, I don't have amnesia, and we have moved forward and we've done our set of reforms within the Department of the Interior, but it also has seemed to me that it is time for this Congress to enact organic legislation on how we produce and have oversight over energy production in the oceans of America. We are doing that through the authority now of the Secretary of Interior, where the secretarial orders have set up the agencies that I have set up in the Department of Interior. But it would be an easy thing for the Congress to go ahead and to act on that codification. Even before the Deepwater Horizon, I testified in front of the House Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and I said an agency that has responsibility for such an important function for the United States of America ought not to exist by a secretarial order. It ought to exist by virtue of law. And there are others, Senator Wyden on the Senate, for example, who has pushed for the codification of our ocean energy programs is something that could be done. It ought not to be controversial. It ought to be able to get done. Other reforms that should be very obvious from the Deepwater Horizon is a $75 million liability cap, which currently exists in law. But for the fact that British Petroleum, on its own, through pressure from us, decided that it would waive its $75 million cap. All of what is now going on in the Gulf, and it's going to be 10, 20 billion. We'll see where it all ultimately ends up. But a $75 million cap would allow any company that's involved in an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico or anywhere else, essentially to hide behind that liability cap. Common sense solution would be to update that liability cap. It's something that the Congress ought to be able to do. A second area has to do with the transboundary agreements, which Secretary Clinton and I and our teams worked on for the last 2 years as President Obama and President Calderon in Mexico brought together a maritime transboundary agreement, which had been in the discussion stages for a long, long period of time. But no one had given it attention until President Obama and Calderon directed our teams on both sides of the border to try to develop this transboundary agreement. We have that transboundary agreement, which was signed in Mexico at a ceremony with President Calderon and Secretary Clinton and Secretary Espinosa not too long ago. It was signed a month and a half or so ago. And the Mexican government, even though it's in the midst of an election season down there as well, has already approved the agreement. It was approved with a vast multi-partisan support in the Mexican Congress. Well, we ought to be able to do the same thing here. This Congress ought to be able to approve this transboundary agreement so that we can move forward with the development of an area called the Western Gap in the Gulf of Mexico. That ought to be an easy thing to do. And the final thing that this Congress should do is to support what is happening with the renewable energy revolution, where the United States really, over the last 3 years, has come to a much better place on what we're doing with renewable energy. And so the investment tax credits and the production tax credits really are something that ought to be renewed by this Congress, and they ought to act on them right away. We've seen the thousands of jobs that have been, in fact, created through wind and solar and geothermal energy. We need to make sure that investors who are willing to invest in those kinds of companies aren't subjected to the financial uncertainties that comes with the stop and start policies of the past, as ITC and PTC are always looked at historically. And if they do not do that, we may end up being where we were in the 1970s. For those of you who were part of all of the discussion way back then, you might remember that the United States was moving forward to look at the possibility of solar energy and other forms of renewable energy, and frankly, it died. And it died because there was no financial certainty with respect to how we were going to move forward through the 80s and the 90s. So let me just conclude before I just open it up for questions by saying this. I've watched and worked in the energy arena for most of my professional life. And I remember very well when President Nixon coined the term energy independence after OPEC was formed. And I remember very well watching on television as President Carter gave his primetime speech on the importance of energy independence and getting to energy independence, as he said, with the moral imperative of war. And then I saw the 80s and I saw the 90s, and I came here as a U.S. Senator in 2004. And at that time, saw that the United States had gone from when Richard Nixon first coined the term energy independence to the point where we were importing over 65% of our oil from foreign countries. And we were not being efficient in how we were using energy, and we were not doing anything to develop an alternative energy strategy. Well, we have done a lot to change that reality in the last 3 years. I'm very proud of the work that we have done, but it's obvious that there's a lot more work to be done. What you need to do with an energy policy that will be sustainable is to keep it in place over a long period of time. We can get to the time when the United States of America can have that energy independence and that energy security, but it takes a sustainability of a policy over a long period of time. And really, that is what is so much at stake in these times as we debate whether or not there will be a clean energy standard, whether or not we will have an ITC or a production tax credit for wind, whether or not we will move forward with the continued efforts of a very broad plan for what we want to do on solar energy in the southwestern part of the United States, or on our Herculean plans to try to move forward with Atlantic wind on the East Coast. So with that, Simon, I'd be happy to take questions.